There are those who would like to have Israel have the security control of Gaza, but maybe have the Palestinian Authority run the day-to-day life inside Gaza. And then there's another category of people that believe it's better to have maybe the UN or another neutral institution running the day-to-day life inside Gaza. We just heard the doctor from the Al-Shifa hospital explain the dire conditions. I don't think anyone really doubts that the Al-Shifa hospital is really in a catastrophic situation. With people dying and overcrowded. First of all, it's very overcrowded. Around 20,000 people roughly are there, both patients, medical staff, and people seeking shelter. But what we do hear is also people at the hospital saying that the Israeli army are shooting. They're shooting at the hospital, and that they're shooting anyone who leaves the hospital. That is very, very different from what we're hearing from the Israeli army. The Israeli army says that they are very close to the hospital with tanks, and they are in fact in fighting with Hamas, because Hamas is there, but they aren't shooting inside the hospital. They're fighting Hamas terrorists outside in the vicinity of the hospital. And one last thing we have to remember, this hospital is quite controversial. First of all, because Israel believes that, or it says it has evidence of Hamas having an underground command center under this hospital, but also because it has been backed up, at least to some extent, by Amnesty International in 2015, when they said the hospital was used by Hamas to torture and to execute Palestinians who collaborated with Israel. So this place is quite controversial in itself.
Jotam, we've seen and heard, we've seen the marches all over across the world wishing to see a ceasefire in Gaza. We also heard from President Macron earlier this week, who has been saying that Israel needs to stop killing women and children. What is this? What effect is this having on the Israeli people in Tel Aviv? You're in Tel Aviv. How is the ground offensive sitting with the people of Israel at the moment?
I would say most people support the overall strategy to remove Hamas from power. There are many people, thousands actually, who go on the street now and demonstrate for a ceasefire, but it's not because they want to keep Hamas in place or because they're so concerned about the Palestinians. The main concern is to get to 239 hostages out from Gaza. That's why they are demonstrating. Obviously, there are those who also demonstrate for the Palestinians, but because Israel is in such a traumatic situation, licking its wounds and still being in this nightmare with 239 people, including babies and elderly, held hostage by Hamas, they do not have patience or time to also be concerned about the Palestinians in Gaza. So really what they're trying to do now is to put pressure on the government to simply give in to what Hamas says that it wants so it can get the hostages out. But nobody, I would say more or less nobody, I haven't heard anyone say that there should be an indefinite ceasefire where Hamas is somehow allowed to rule Gaza the day after this war.
Does the government have the full support of the people of Israel at the moment?
It's also a very good question. I think you can divide that question into two. You can say many people would like Netanyahu, the prime minister, to resign. That's a fact. We hear that every day, both people demonstrating, people in TV studios. But there's an overall support for the government because the government is also including other parties, such as the National Unity Party, led by former Defense Minister Benny Gantz. So it's a bit of a difficult question to answer, really. Netanyahu is highly unpopular, but the government and what it's doing in Gaza has support simply because people are fed up and they want to see Hamas removed.
And what is life like at the moment for you in Tel Aviv, Jotam? What is the atmosphere like? I was watching a video again of the, I think it's called the Iron Dome, the defense system that was shooting down rockets over the skies of Tel Aviv. Give us a little bit of an idea of what it's like for you there every day.
So first of all, every day is a new day, really. Some days you run to shelter several times a day, other days you don't. But I don't think anyone is not affected by the war. Every person in Israel somehow knows somebody who's either been killed or kidnapped or who survived the atrocities committed by Hamas. And also, there is a growing concern about Hezbollah in Lebanon and whether they might be entering the war. Just a few hours ago, they fired anti-tank missiles at the northern Gaza, at the northern border with Lebanon and Israel, and several people were wounded, including an 80-year-old man who's in serious condition. Now, these things tend to really escalate the whole situation. And as the defense minister said just yesterday, he warned Hezbollah that if they continue to do what they do and if they make one mistake, Beirut will look like Gaza. And these are not empty threats. And this is something that every person in Israel is very worried about. Because the minute Hezbollah, if they do enter into a war, all of Israel will be exposed to their missiles. And they aren't missiles like the ones we're seeing from Hamas. They're much heavier, much more precise, and thousands of people will likely die in such a scenario.
Jotam, one final question. You've been saying about how the people of Israel, their main concern is to get those hostages back from Gaza, back from the hands of Hamas. Is there at all a conversation happening within Israel, within the population in Israel, of what happens next? Because everybody wants to see an end to this fighting, hopefully an end which entails the hostages safely being returned to Israel. But are there conversations of what happens in the future? Because this war is going to change everything. But what do the Israeli people want to see happen after that?
Absolutely. Every single day from morning till evening, they've been discussing this for weeks, both in TV studios and the radio and people in general. I would divide it into roughly three categories. There are those who would like to resettle Gaza, reoccupy it, take control of the entire thing, have Jews living in Gaza again. Then there are those who would like to have Israel have the security control of Gaza, but maybe have the Palestinian Authority run the day-to-day life inside Gaza. And then there's another category of people that believe it's better to have maybe the UN or another neutral institution running the day-to-day life inside Gaza. But everyone is concerned about what will happen the day after, because as of now, there's no real strategy from the Israeli government.